Let me tell you something that's going to hit you right where it needs to. You weren't placed in that narcissist's life by accident. And no, you didn't attract them because something is broken or wrong with you. You crossed paths with them because there is something powerful and unshakable inside you that needed to be woken up. I know it's confusing. I know it's exhausting. I know what it feels like to constantly question your worth, to wonder if you're imagining things, to sit there in silence with tears burning in your eyes after being gaslit for the 100th time. You kept giving, you kept hoping, you kept trying, and they kept taking over and over again. But you weren't placed in the narcissist's life by accident. That's something you need to hear, and not just with your ears, but deep in your soul. This wasn't just some random cruel twist of fate. You weren't unlucky. You didn't just stumble into the wrong person's orbit by chance. There was a reason. Something in you, something powerful and unshakable, needed to be revealed. And believe it or not, this painful, confusing relationship was the mirror that brought it into focus. You see, life has this strange, often uncomfortable way of waking us up. Sometimes it's gentle, but sometimes it's a firestorm. And narcissists, they're like emotional wildfires. They burn through your boundaries, consume your energy, test your reality, and leave you wondering if you'll ever feel like yourself again. But in the ashes, something extraordinary begins to emerge, and that something is you. In the beginning, it didn't look like a lesson. It looked like love, or at least what you thought love was. The charm, the attention, the way they seemed to see you, like really see you, it felt magical. And if you're honest, it felt healing. Maybe it felt like everything you'd ever wanted to feel. They made you feel chosen, important, needed. But that wasn't love. That was the bait. That was the illusion. And when it started to crumble, it didn't fall apart quietly. It shattered like glass. You began to notice the shifts, the passive-aggressive comments, the control, the blame, the emotional whiplash. One moment you were their everything, and the next you were walking on eggshells, trying to get back in their good graces. And here's what hurts the most. You stayed. Not because you were weak, not because you didn't know better. You stayed because your heart is loyal, because you believed in people, because you wanted to fix it, to make it work. And somewhere deep down, you thought maybe, if you just loved harder, they'd change. But they didn't. Because narcissists don't want love. They want control. They don't connect. They consume. And slowly you stopped recognizing yourself. You started questioning your sanity. Your joy got dimmer. Your voice got quieter. But even in that silence, even in your lowest, most confused state, life was trying to tell you something. You weren't placed in their life to lose yourself. You were placed there to find yourself. That experience cracked you open. And yeah, it hurt like hell. But through that pain, you began to see things you had never seen before. You saw how little you'd been asking for, how much of yourself you'd been shrinking, how often you had put everyone else first while ignoring your own needs. And here's the truth that so many people miss. Sometimes we meet the wrong person to remind us how right we deserve to feel. Sometimes the wrong relationship is the bridge to the right relationship with ourselves. That's what this was. It wasn't a punishment, it was preparation. Life placed you in the narcissist's life because you have something they never will: real love, deep empathy, and the courage to grow. You didn't attract them because you're weak. You attracted them because your light is bright, and bright light attracts shadows. But here's the thing: shadows can't survive when you finally turn the light inward. This happened so you could reclaim your power. This happened so you could learn the difference between being needed and being respected. This happened so you could finally say, I deserve more than this, and mean it. And now you know. Now you've seen behind the mask. Now you have the scars and the wisdom. And maybe you still carry some of that pain. Maybe you still doubt yourself sometimes. But the fact that you're still here, still standing, that's proof of something the narcissist never counted on. You didn't break. You woke up. You were never placed in their life to fix them. You were placed there to find you. You are not broken, and you are absolutely not to blame for what happened. This is the part of the healing journey that so many people struggle with. When you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, when you've been manipulated, gaslit, and emotionally drained, it's almost impossible not to internalize the damage. You start questioning everything. Was it really that bad? Did I overreact? Am I the problem? And that's exactly what narcissists want. That's part of their design. Because if they can make you believe it's all your fault, they never have to take responsibility, and you stay stuck, spinning in self-doubt, apologizing for things that weren't yours to carry. But here's what you need to hear. This wasn't your fault. You were not too sensitive. You were not too emotional. You were not too much. You were simply someone with a big heart who got caught in someone else's broken pattern. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The truth is, narcissists are drawn to people who care deeply, who give endlessly, and who try tirelessly. They seek out the givers, the fixers, the ones who try to see the best in everyone. You might think that's your flaw, that you should have known better. But no, your kindness is not a flaw. Your loyalty is not a flaw. Your love is not a flaw. The real problem is that someone took those beautiful qualities and used them against you. You're not broken because you didn't leave sooner. You're not broken because you tried to make it work. You stayed because that's what you do when you care. You try. You hold on. You believe in people. And even when it started to hurt, even when your gut was screaming that something wasn't right, you kept going because that's who you are. And let's be real. Narcissists don't start with the cruelty. They don't show you the manipulation on day one. They give you just enough love, just enough affection, just enough approval to keep you hooked. And every time you think about walking away, they throw out just enough hope to make you believe things will change. That's not love. That's control. And no one sees it clearly when they're in it. You were reacting like any emotionally intelligent, hopeful person would. You were trying to make sense of behavior that didn't make sense. You were trying to hold on to a connection that at one point felt so real. But now you know. Now you're starting to see the pattern. You're starting to see how they twisted your words, rewrote the story, and made you doubt your own reality. You're realizing how many times you bent yourself into someone you didn't even recognize just to keep the peace. And even though it hurts, even though it feels raw and unfair, that awareness is the beginning of your freedom. You're not broken. You were targeted, and that distinction is everything. Because when you believe you're broken, you start thinking you need to be fixed. You try to become smaller, quieter, more agreeable. You lose yourself. But when you realize you were targeted, you start to understand your strength. You start to reclaim your voice. You start to heal. It's okay if you're angry. It's okay if you're sad. It's okay if you're confused. These emotions don't mean you're damaged. They mean you're processing truth after months or years of lies. Let them come. Let them rise. Because that's how you clean the wound. That's how you begin again. What you've been through doesn't define you. It reveals you. It reveals how deeply you can love. It reveals how much pain you can hold and still show up. It reveals your resilience. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were exactly what you were supposed to be, loving, loyal, trusting. And the fact that someone took advantage of that is their reflection, not yours. So let that shame go. Let that self-blame go. Stand in front of the mirror and look at the person who survived. Look at the person who is still standing, still loving, still fighting to become whole. That's not broken. That's powerful. That's beautiful. That's you. The relationship was meant to awaken your power. That might be hard to hear when all you feel is pain, when the betrayal still stings, when you lie awake replaying conversations, wondering how someone could love you one day and emotionally abandon you the next. It feels cruel. It feels senseless. But there's something deeper going on, something that goes beyond the surface of the heartbreak, the confusion, and the loss. That relationship wasn't the end of you. It was the beginning of your awakening. See, narcissists are masterful at one thing, mirroring. In the early stages, they reflect back everything you want to believe about love. They become your fantasy. They become your safe place. They become the person you think you've been waiting for. But over time, the mirror shatters. The truth starts to bleed through the cracks. Their mask slips, and what's left isn't love. It's control, manipulation, and emotional chaos. You spend so much time trying to get back to that original version of them, that person who once made you feel so special. You think, maybe if I just communicate better, maybe if I just love them more, maybe if I change, they'll change too. But they don't. And that's where the shift begins, not in them, but in you. Because at some point, something inside you wakes up. It doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, subtle, almost invisible at first. But eventually, you stop bending. You stop begging. You stop believing the lies. And you start asking the questions that change everything. What about me? What do I need? What do I deserve? That is the moment your power begins to return. That's what the relationship was for. Not to destroy you, but to shake you awake. To strip away everything that was never truly you. The people-pleasing, the self-abandonment, the fear of not being enough. It pushed you to the edge so you could finally choose you. Sometimes the only way we learn to speak up is when we've been silenced too long. Sometimes the only way we learn to set boundaries is after we've been trampled over. Sometimes the only way we learn to trust ourselves is when someone has spent years making us doubt our every instinct. So yes, the pain was real. Yes, it was unfair, but it was also the fire that forged a stronger, clearer, more powerful version of you, the version that no longer settles, the version that listens to her gut, the version that no longer waits for someone else to give her worth, because she already knows she has it. The awakening is messy, it's painful, it's disorienting, but it's also sacred, because when you come out on the other side, you're no longer afraid of losing someone who couldn't truly love you. You're no longer willing to compromise your peace for someone else's chaos. You realize you don't need to be chosen, you just need to choose yourself. And let's be honest, the old you wouldn't have. The old you would have stayed, the old you would have kept fighting to be understood. But you're not that version anymore. You've evolved, you've risen, you've found strength you didn't even know you had. That relationship wasn't your ending, it was your initiation. It was the wake-up call your soul needed to remember who you really are. You're not powerless. You never were. You were just temporarily disconnected from your truth. And now, you're reconnecting. You're remembering. You're rebuilding. Not into who you were before the narcissist, but into someone even more powerful, someone who knows her value, someone who protects her peace, someone who will never, ever let anyone dim her light again. This was always about your power. It just took the pain to reveal it. Narcissists teach you about self-respect, not because they show it to you, because they don't, but because the lack of it becomes so loud, so consistent, so painful, that you are finally forced to take a long, hard look at how little you've been giving it to yourself. You don't go into a relationship expecting to be disrespected. No one does. You go in open-hearted, ready to love, ready to build something real. You ignore the little red flags at first, the offhand insults disguised as jokes, the moments where they dismiss your feelings, the way they twist your words and make you feel like you're overreacting. It starts small. It always does. But over time, those small moments of disrespect become a pattern, a cycle, a constant erosion of your self-worth. And here's the thing, when you're in it, you don't always see it clearly. You excuse the behavior, you rationalize it. You think they're just stressed, or they didn't mean it that way. You want to believe in their potential. You hold on to the version of them that was charming, affectionate, and so good at making you feel like you were the most important person in the world. But that version only existed to hook you. The reality is, narcissists test your boundaries in the most subtle ways. At first, they see how much they can take, how far they can push, and if you don't push back, they push more. Not because you're weak, not because you're naive, but because you were taught, somewhere along the line, that being kind meant tolerating bad behavior, that being patient meant waiting for someone to change, that loving someone meant putting their needs ahead of your own. And the narcissist uses that against you, every time. But there comes a breaking point. There always does. That moment when something clicks, when the disrespect becomes too obvious, too painful to ignore, when you hear them say something cruel, or you feel that deep emptiness after another emotional manipulation, and instead of shrinking, you stop and say, "Wait, this isn't okay." That moment is the beginning of self-respect, and it often comes not as a roar, but as a whisper. A quiet realization that you deserve more, that you've been giving more than you've received, that you've been showing up for someone who only shows up when it benefits them. And that whisper, that's your power returning. That's your self-worth rising to the surface. The narcissist didn't teach you respect by modeling it. They taught you by being the complete absence of it. And in that vacuum, you were forced to ask yourself, why am I tolerating this? Why do I keep explaining myself to someone who isn't even listening? Why am I begging for the bare minimum? And those questions are not signs of weakness, they're signs of awakening. See, self-respect isn't about being tough or cold or cutting people off for no reason. It's about knowing your limits. It's about recognizing when your kindness is being mistaken for permission. It's about no longer accepting crumbs from someone who could never offer you the whole meal. And sometimes it takes being disrespected over and over again to finally realize that respect doesn't come from others. It starts with you. You begin to take your power back in the smallest ways. You say no. You stop explaining. You stop engaging in conversations that always leave you feeling worse. You walk away, not to hurt them, but to finally protect yourself. You realize that your peace is more important than their approval, and maybe for the first time in your life, you choose you. That's the gift hidden in the mess. That's the lesson underneath the chaos. The narcissist came into your life to expose every place where you were settling, every part of you that was still trying to earn love, every bit of you that thought you had to sacrifice yourself to be worthy. And when you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back. You can't keep playing small. You begin to understand that your value isn't up for negotiation. Your worth isn't defined by how someone else treats you. It's defined by how you treat yourself. You don't learn self-respect in comfort. You learn it in the fire. And while that fire may have been started by a narcissist, what rises from the flames is you, stronger, wiser, and no longer willing to tolerate anything less than what you truly deserve. You needed to learn how to say enough. That single word, enough, can change your life. It's small, but it's powerful. It's not just a boundary. It's a declaration. It's the moment your soul stands up after being pushed down for too long and says, "No more." And the truth is, most of us don't get to that moment until we've been stretched past our limit, until we've been broken open, until we've given every last part of ourselves to someone who only knew how to take. In relationships with narcissists, the erosion is gradual. It sneaks up on you. You start out strong, hopeful, open. You believe in love, in people, in the goodness of giving someone your heart. And they sense that. They spot that willingness to give, to forgive, to try harder, and they latch onto it. They learn exactly what you need to hear, how to charm you, how to become what you think you've been missing. It's all very intentional. They mirror your desires so well that you mistake it for deep compatibility. But then things start to shift, not all at once. Slowly. They begin to withdraw affection when you speak up. They make you question your feelings. They reframe every disagreement as your fault. And every time you get hurt, you don't walk away. You try harder. You love deeper. You explain more. You begin bending yourself, reshaping yourself in hopes of getting back to that first version of them, the one who made you feel seen, valued, chosen. And every time they sense you're pulling away, they reel you back in. Just enough attention, just enough kindness, just enough hope. It keeps you locked in the cycle, and you keep holding on because you don't want to give up on someone you love. You think, if I just try one more time, if I just stay patient, if I just don't upset them, maybe this can still work. But love doesn't look like you begging someone to treat you with respect.